The sky over the small town of Riverdale was turning a heavy gray as the afternoon progressed. The streets were relatively empty, as if the threatening rain had warned the people that it was better to stay home. It was not a particularly memorable day, but for police officer Daniel Fernandez, his shift was about to take an unexpected turn. At 27 years old, Daniel had served as a police officer for 5 years, carrying a mixture of determination and, at times, a touch of arrogance. He had grown up in a middle-class neighborhood, where racial tensions were part of the daily whisper, almost imperceptible but always present. Daniel had a certain air of self-satisfaction, a product of his youth and initial success in his career. Tall, with short brown hair and penetrating eyes that could freeze anyone who didn't know his softer side, Daniel carried a shadow within him, a doubt he couldn't define, which sometimes led him to act with unnecessary harshness. And on that day, that shadow guided him towards a man walking in the southern part of the city, a region known for its predominantly African-American population. Marcos was a 35-year-old man with a robust build and a calm demeanor. He had worked hard to get where he was and was not the type to be easily intimidated. His black skin shone with the reflection of the moisture in the air, and his features were marked by a mixture of pride and humility, as if every step he took was a reminder of the struggles he had overcome to become who he was. Marcos had grown up in a Catholic church, where his devout mother had raised him under the principles of faith and justice. From a very young age, he had learned that a man's dignity was not defined by his color, but by how he faced adversity as he walked towards his destiny. Dressed in a dark suit that accentuated his elegance, Marcos noticed a police car slowly approaching the street, the sound of the siren silent but insinuating, causing him to turn his head in a gesture of curiosity and caution. Daniel, behind the wheel, observed Marcos with calculating eyes. For Daniel, simply seeing a well-dressed black man walking in a neighborhood like that was reason enough to investigate him. "Hey, you! Where do you think you're going?" Daniel yelled as he approached. Marcos stopped, surprised by the aggressive tone, but remained calm, knowing that any wrong move could be interpreted in the worst way. "Good afternoon, officer. I'm on my way to a meeting," Marcos responded politely, although a flash of annoyance crossed his eyes. Daniel got out of the car and approached Marcos, his boots echoing on the damp pavement. The difference in height between them was evident, but the perceived difference in power was even greater. Daniel looked him up and down, examining his suit, his watch, and finally his face, as if searching for some sign of guilt. "A meeting, huh? And what kind of meeting would that be? You don't seem to be from around here," Daniel questioned. Marcos took a deep breath, controlling the anger that was beginning to boil inside him. It wasn't the first time he had been stopped without reason, but this time there was something different in the air, a sense that things could quickly get worse. "It's a business meeting, officer. I don't think it's necessary to detain me for that," Marcos responded. Daniel let out a short, humorless laugh that echoed off the surrounding buildings. "Work, of course. I know how it is. Show me an ID and quick," he demanded. Marcos nodded slowly, took out his wallet with deliberately slow movements, taking care not to give Daniel any pretext to act against him. He handed over his ID, watching as Daniel examined it with disdain. "Marcos Silva," Daniel murmured, and then asked, "And where do you say you work?" Before Marcos could respond, a voice from Daniel's radio interrupted the tense moment. It was an urgent call from the police station, where apparently all the officers were needed back immediately, as something important was about to happen. Daniel tossed the ID back to Marcos with a gesture of disdain. "Look, get out of here before I change my mind," he said, before turning and returning to his car. Marcos picked up his ID from the ground, maintaining his impassive expression, although inside he felt the burning of humiliation. However, instead of retorting or making a sarcastic comment, he turned and continued on his way. He knew that the true moment of justice would come soon. The next morning, the police station was filled with a palpable nervousness. Rumors were flying among the officers that something big was about to happen. Daniel arrived and was met with furtive glances, his colleagues whispering almost inaudibly. His boss, Captain Rodriguez, a middle-aged man with graying beard and a deep voice, was normally reserved in recent days, and now the reason for this behavior was about to be revealed. "Attention, officers. Gather in the conference room," Captain Rodriguez ordered without raising his voice, but with a tone that left no room for discussion. Daniel followed his fellow police officers into the room, feeling a slight tingling in the back of his neck. He hadn't done anything out of the ordinary, except for the incident with the black man in the southern part of the city, but that was nothing new. The police always had such meetings, especially in a city like Riverdale. When everyone was gathered, Captain Rodriguez cleared his throat to get their attention. "I want you all to know that today we will be receiving a new police chief," he announced, letting the news sink in among the present. Daniel felt the attention in the room increase. "He is someone who has worked hard to get here, and I'm sure he will make great changes in our unit. So, I want you all to welcome him with the respect he deserves," the captain concluded. The murmurs intensified. For some, this was not exactly something they had expected. Daniel was particularly anxious about his position on the team, which was solid, but a new chief could disrupt that stability. Finally, the door to the room opened, and the new police chief entered. The murmurs ceased immediately, and all eyes turned to the figure approaching with firm steps. It was Marco Silva, dressed in his impeccably dark suit, the same man Daniel had humiliated the day before. Daniel's expression went from confusion to disbelief and then to a mixture of fear and shame. Marcos walked to the front of the room, his gaze sweeping over each of the officers who observed him with a mixture of surprise and respect. When his eyes met Daniel's, he maintained his composure, but couldn't help the slight smile that formed on his lips. "Good morning, gentlemen," Marcos began with a firm voice. "I am Marco Silva, and as of today, I will be your new police chief. I know some of you know me, and I hope that, over time, we will all get to know each other better." The tension in the room could be cut with a knife. Daniel was completely still, trying to process what was happening. His mind raced 1,000 miles an hour, repeating every detail of his encounter with Marcos the day before. He felt trapped, unsure of how to get out of the situation he had gotten himself into. Marcos continued speaking in his calm, more authoritative tone, outlining his vision for the police force and his plans to improve community relations. As he spoke, he did not lose sight of the expression on Daniel's face, a man who now understood the weight of his actions. But Marcos was not a vindictive man. His mother had always taught him that true strength lies in compassion and the ability to forgive. And for those who are wondering, yes, I have lived in Riverdale for many years. I know this city well, its problems, and the solutions we can implement together. I want you to know that I am here to work with you, not against you," Marcos concluded, pausing to let his words sink in among his new subordinates. "But I also want you to know that I will not tolerate any form of discrimination or abuse of power. This is a new beginning for all of us." Marcos directed a final look at Daniel, a look that was not filled with resentment, but with something much more powerful. An opportunity, the opportunity to learn, grow, and redeem himself. However, he did not say anything directly to Daniel. What Daniel felt in that moment was much deeper than any words of reprimand could evoke. The officers began to leave the room, one by one, murmuring among themselves. Daniel remained seated, unable to move, his mind continuing to repeat the encounter from the day before like a broken record. He had never felt such a weight on his conscience. Captain Rodriguez approached him and placed a hand on his shoulder, in a friendly gesture, but also a warning. "It's better you talk to him, Daniel," he said calmly. "This is your moment to show what kind of man you are." Daniel nodded slowly, knowing the captain was right. He rose with effort and left the room. The corridor was almost empty, but in the distance, he saw Marcos walking towards his new office. He could no longer delay. "Mr. Silva," he called, and his voice sounded strangely weak. Marcos stopped and turned slowly towards Daniel. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Their eyes met once again, but this time there was no barrier of authority between them. Only two men, one trying to find the right words and the other willing to listen. "I want to apologize for yesterday, Daniel," he said, his voice full of sincerity. "I had no idea who you were, and I behaved in an unforgivable way. I am ashamed." Marcos looked at him, letting Daniel's words settle. "I don't care about who I was yesterday, Daniel. What matters to me is who you are today," Marcos finally responded, his tone gentle but firm. "We all make mistakes, but the important thing is how we face them. I'm willing to let this go, but I need to know if you are too." Daniel nodded, feeling a great weight being lifted from his chest. "Yes, sir, I am." Marcos extended his hand, and Daniel grasped it firmly, feeling the strength and warmth in Marcos's grip. In that moment, Daniel knew that his life and career were about to change forever. He had learned a lesson that would not only shape his future in the police force, but also his role in society, as a man capable of recognizing his mistakes and growing from them. And so, friends, we learn that true strength is not in the power we wield, but in the humility with which we accept our flaws and the willingness to change for the better. Because at the end of the day, we all have the capacity to be something greater than our past mistakes. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and like this video. Your interaction is essential for us to continue bringing inspiring stories that remind us of the importance of being better versions of ourselves. Together, we can build a more just and compassionate world.